Great. Let me know. Great. Good morning. Happy Saturday. Thank you for joining another one of our virtual tree partner walks here. Today we are at beautiful Washington Park on Chicago's South Side. If you don't know it, this is 270 acres of parks and woodlands and amenities and a water feature and a natural area part of the park district. And we are going to talk to somebody who manages that natural area later on about noon. For now, we are in the Arboretum located just north of Garfield Boulevard, just east of Martin Luther King Drive. This area is actually designated as an Arboretum, and we're going to check out a number of the great trees here. But if you are not familiar with this park, you are really missing out. It's, as I mentioned, 270 acres, very beautiful. Be a fine day to be here and any other day too. So today we are going to do a little bit of tree ID, and so we're going to talk about some basic tree ID, but we're also going to look at some very distinguishing features of particular species. Later on, we will put a map together of where these are so you can come check them out yourself. So my name is Al DeRue. I'm a certified arborist, and I am the Tree Keepers Program Manager for Open Lands, 4 years and counting. Open Lands was founded in 1963 with the idea that urban areas need open space as well. Mainly people think about open space and perhaps they're thinking about the Shawnee National Forest in Southern Illinois, which is beautiful, or maybe a national park out in Colorado. And that's also great, but we need open spaces in our urban areas like Chicago as well. And Open Lands helps to provide that. Open Lands is involved in a number of other areas as well. We have a program called Birds in My Neighborhood where we take students out to identify birds and really to get them outside and appreciate them outside. That's being done virtually at the moment. But normally they would do a walk around the neighborhood to identify birds, and then maybe do a park such as this one, and then a field trip to perhaps the Medewin Tallgrass Prairie out near Joliet, or the Open Lands Lakeshore Preserve up in Lake County along Lake Michigan. Open Lands is also involved in a bit of advocacy work at the local, state, and federal level. We're behind such things as the push for a new civilian conservation corps, which you can find the petition for that on our website. And take some of these people who are out of work and put them to work, getting some work done, such as the things that happened during the Great Depression. At the local level, we're pushing for an urban forestry advisory board here in Chicago, which would get together a group of tree experts to help advise the city on best practices in tree policy. And you can find the information about that on our website as well. Tree Keepers is a part of the forestry program at Open Lands, which has really grown in the past, say, about 7 years. We have planted nearly 7,000 trees in parkways and parks, mainly in Chicago, but also in the south suburban areas. We do this mainly through something called the Tree Planters Grant. Again, information about this is online. And really everything you need to know about applying for this Tree Planters Grant is online, because we want to make this easy for people, not hard. And with this, people in a community can apply for it, and then we find open spaces in your neighborhood. And as long as the neighbors agree to have a tree planted or agree to water and take care of a tree for the first 3 years, we can plant a tree in an open space in the parkway in front of their house. This way we can not only help increase Chicago's canopy, we can also build community by getting our neighbors to know each other, get to know area tree keepers, get to know Open Land staff members. So in the words of tree keeper Jim Dehorn, who had my position a number of years ago, he liked to say that trees are what we do, but people are why we do it. So yes, we do a lot of tree work, but again, building community to build more resilient communities is a lot of what we're about. And so I encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Normally we would be doing this in person, and we would want to have a discussion and not really a lecture. We have a number of tree keepers who have volunteered to help answer some questions. And if there are any questions that should reach the larger whole, Lucia will go ahead and send those to me, and then we can answer those to the larger audience. Again, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. And I think we'll get started on some tree ID. And so I tell you what, our first tree here I've decided is going to be this Siberian elm to the east of us here. Elms are kind of famous for having this sort of vase shape. So a lot of times if you're thinking tree ID, it's like, oh, I need to have the leaf in front of me or something. In terms of you can start identifying a tree often by its growth habit, or sometimes we just call it its habit. but really it's its overall form. And we have various words we use to describe this. And often we describe elms as having a vase shape. This is actually a Siberian elm, which you will see these around. Um, and if we can, you know what, we'll do a little bit more on that later on. Um, and so you will also see different types of elms. Once upon a time, we had a large number of American elms planted up and down our streets. And unfortunately, most of those suffered due to Dutch elm disease. One of the lessons we learned from that is we need to diversify the species we have. We can't just have one species after another. And unfortunately, we saw that happen with ash trees and emerald ash borer as well. So we're really making an effort, not only we at Open Lands, but city forestry and communities all over are really making a concerted effort to plant a wider variety of tree species. And so let's go take a look at another tree we have here. This is also a tree you'll find up and down our streets. It's a very common species. It is actually not native. It's related to a similar native species called American linden or Tilia americana. Actually, this is little leaf linden. This leaf is much bigger than it typically is, but it is a simple leaf, so there's just one leaflet, if you will, as opposed to a compound leaf, which will have multiple leaflets coming from a single bud here. It also has a toothed margin. And when we talk about the margin, we talk about the edge, if you will, the perimeter of the leaf. Another easy way to tell lindens is it's got an asymmetrical shape. So the base here is a little bit deeper or wider, if you will, than this side. So it's asymmetric shape. It's got kind of a smooth bark and these red buds, almost even a little bit of a zigzag towards a kind of a red zigzag color to it. And another basic tree ID feature we can use to deduce what a tree species is if we don't know it or if you're fairly new to this. We talk about trees often as being alternate or opposite, and opposite trees have leaves that come out directly across from each other, whereas here you can see that they're staggered. So we refer to this as opposite. There's really only about a handful of species that have opposite branching structure where the leaves are directly across. We'll see some of those later on. We've got a nice mnemonic device they use to remember which trees have opposite branching structure. We call it Mad Bucking Horse or some variation on that. It stands for maple, ash, dogwood, buckeye, and its close relative, the horse chestnut. And so if you're not sure what a tree is, the first thing you can do is like, is it opposite or alternate? And if it's alternate, then you know it's not a maple, ash, or a dogwood, with one exception of an alternate leaf dogwood. And also, if you do see that it's opposite, you really narrow down what those trees can be. And so again, if you think of the overall form and then start to have these deductive process, you can begin to identify trees and certainly at least figure out what they're not. So let's keep moving because it is a beautiful day outside, and hopefully after this tree walk, you'll get outside yourself. If you're not sure of places to go to enjoy the outdoors in the Chicago region, Open Lands created something called the Get Outside map, and you can find that on our website. And that can show you all sorts of places in Chicago, in surrounding Cook County, in the surrounding areas. We've got all sorts of recommendations for getting outside to enjoy nature, not only in the summer and the fall, but all year round. And I'll tell you what, we've got a better ginkgo than that later on. So let's keep moving. So again, we're here in Washington Park on Chicago's south side. We ran the tree keepers course here about 2 years ago. And so we're gonna go check on how the trees we planted with that course are doing. I should talk about the tree keepers course a little bit. The tree keepers program itself is about 30 years old. Actually, we celebrate our 30th birthday at Open Lands next year. We've trained about 2,200 people through this course, which covers everything from tree ID, like we're doing now, to planting, pruning, mulching, tree physiology, like the insides of a tree morphology, think morph as in shape, so how a tree grows, how its overall form. We also cover advocacy. How do we interact with our elected officials to let them know how important trees are? We also have content such as working with volunteers, because as a volunteer Army tree keepers, we interact with the public. They could be young people, they could be retirees, people from all walks of life. So we also teach a little bit about how to work with volunteers to make sure they have a successful experience when we do have volunteer events, which eventually someday we will. We also cover construction damage and soils, and some other content. And so for more information about the Tree Keepers course and to get added to our list to know when future courses are coming, you can check out that on our website as well. Here we've got a red oak tree. Here we go. So generally speaking, we break oaks down into two categories, depending on whether or not the leaves have pointed tips, as you can see here, or rounded ends to the lobes here. So when we refer to the lobes, we're talking about this part here, and the spaces between the lobes we refer to as sinuses. So if you hear us talk about that later on. And so this is a red oak. It's actually got a little bit of a point tip, and even here in the fall, you can still see that. Whereas members of the white oak group have rounded tips. And so another easy way to identify oaks is they tend to have clustered buds at the end of the branches. So if you can see that here, you can see these buds that are clustered at the end of the branch. That's a great way. So if you're not really sure what you've got, if you see clustered buds at the end of the tip here and alternate branching, you pretty good odds you got yourself an oak tree. So this is a red oak native to the region. This is one of the several different types of oaks we plant. I mentioned earlier, we've planted over almost 7,000 trees in the past about 7 years. In recent years, about 50% of that have been various oak species, because we really need to replenish the oaks we have. We've lost a great number of oaks in the northeastern Illinois region, and so we need to replant that, because oaks really are a part of our heritage in terms of the landscape here. And so we plant red oak, some white oak, shingle oak, and various others, and we'll see a number of those as we go on our walk. So you know what? Actually, from a distance here, I think some of it, obviously we're going to give you a lot of science today, but I also just want to be able to pan just to enjoy what we have. And so you can see the beautiful yellow colors on these ginkgo trees here. And ginkgos are kind of famous for they'll drop all of their leaves in one shot. So these haven't quite done that yet, but these their green leaves in the summer turn this beautiful kind of golden yellow in the fall. So even from a distance, you can identify this as ginkgo. Ginkgo is actually not native, but we do plant it on occasion. Actually, it was the favorite tree of tree keeper Jim Dehorn. So there's quite a number of them here. I just love that the beautiful fall color it's still got here. An interesting thing about ginkgos is that they're kind of a dinosaur of a tree. It's estimated to be approximately 250 million years old. And that leaf is actually a specialized needle that has a real distinct fan shape. Once you learn how to identify ginkgo, you'll see them, you can identify that very easily. And you will see those in parks and parkways on occasion. And there's quite a number of them here. And sometimes when we're walking around, you can see them. Actually, I think that's another stand of them a little further there. So even from a distance, sometimes you can identify trees. You don't necessarily need to be up close. And so as we walk, let's see what we got here. And so if there are any questions or comments, this would be a good time to hear them while we check out our next tree. And it looks like we've got a Chinka Pin Oak here. Oh, let's see if I can get a leaf. Here we go. So this is another native oak species that we plant. It's called Chinka Pin. And so it's got a little bit of a different shape, but a little bit kind of almost more of a toothed margin as opposed to lobed, and a little bit sometimes even wider in the middle and even towards the far end than at the base. So we plant a limited number of these when we can get them. So very cool to see here. We've seen, we'll see about 4 or 5 different oaks today, and kind of cool to see this. And again, you can see the clustered buds on the tip there. Let you know you've got an oak tree there. See the clustered buds. And I'll tell you what, let's keep trucking. We are almost to where we planted about 24 trees here when we ran the course in the spring of 2018. I'm really excited to go see how they're doing. And so as we walk towards it, we can just kind of enjoy the panorama that we have. In fact, if we pan to my right, to the west, we've got a couple of walnut trees. Walnuts have a very straight central trunk and very dark ridged bark. And even from here, you can kind of identify that. And there are a number of these. You will see walnuts around town. These are native. The fruit is especially prized by squirrel and other animals. In fact, you can even make a dye from the fruit. And we will see, I don't know if we're gonna see a walnut up close. So the fruit is very distinctive. I found this in the ground in my neighborhood a number of years ago. This is when it first drops, this is almost like a lime green color, a real distinct musky smell that I actually think smells really good. And so this is a walnut fruit that's actually a couple of years old, and you can actually still smell, not you at home, so you can still get a little bit of that smell out of it. So again, it's got the very strong, straight central trunk, which we refer to as excurrent is the term we use for that, as opposed to a tree that is decurrent form, which is more of a broad spreading crown, as opposed to this main central leader you can see there. And I'll tell you what, we're coming up on the trees we did plant 2 years ago, so they've had a couple of years to really fill in. We've got a couple other really cool trees here too. So we planted a number of native species. It was actually a great day. It was in the spring of 2018. And so part of most tree keeper classes, we actually have a planting day where we get together, we plant a number of trees. And one of the great things about it is existing tree keepers, people who've already taken the course, come and help the new tree keepers plant. And it's just so great to see them come out and share their knowledge and experience with the new tree keepers. It really helps them feel like the new people feel like they're part of the family. And if we've got any new tree keepers on the course, hello, thank you for taking the time and joining us today. And do we have any questions in the chat or any comments thus far?
They've all been answered, it looks like. Good. Is there an easy way to remember how to ID oaks and differentiate between the different varieties?
So the question was, is there an easy way to identify oaks?
To remember how to identify oaks and differentiate between the different varieties. Yeah.
So we've got a question that came in. Is there an easy way to identify oaks and tell the different species? Well, again, the clustered buds at the end of the branch tips is a great way to identify oaks. Oaks have also alternate branching structure. So if you're looking at something that has opposite branching structure, you know that's not an oak. Oaks have simple leaves. And so if you've got a compound leaf, you'll know that's not an oak. And some oaks in particular, we're going to see a beautiful 200-year-old Bur Oak later on, very thick ridges on it. And so sometimes it's not even the leaves, but it's the bark and whatnot. Red oak is famous for having like smooth tops to the ridges on it. I almost refer to them as like ski slopes. And once you see that, it's really distinctive. You can identify that anywhere. Know you get a red oak. White oak tends to have slight whitish kind of splotches towards the base of the trunk. And so again, it's not just leaves that we use to identify trees. And we have some hackberry we planted with the course. Hackberry is a native tree. You will find it up and down the streets because it was planted quite a bit. And even though there are quite a number of hackberries out there, you know what, let me see if I can find a better leaf than that. Even in the fall here, you can kind of see the asymmetric base to the hackberry leaf here. It's a little bit deeper on this side than this side. So hackberry is native, a very tolerant of salt and pollution. So it makes for a great street tree. And at one point, it was actually in the elm family, and you can almost see the elm a little bit. It looks a little bit like the elm leaf too, but it's actually no longer in the elm category. And as you can see, it's got opposite branching structure as well. I'm sorry, alternate branching structure, and that the buds stagger, if you will, as opposed to being directly across. Hackberry is also famous for getting something called hackberry nipple gall, which is a little bump you'll see on the leaf. That it looks kind of weird, but it's totally benign, and that's just a little bug making itself a little home there. So that's an easy way to identify hackberry, as are the tiny little fruits it gets on it as well. So again, we planted these in the spring of 2018, and so we've got a number of hackberries here. And tell you what, there's a really cool tree that we do plant. We didn't plant this one, but we as Openlands planted. It's more of an understory species.
And someone asked, Kevin Sorby asked, hackberry are great trees. Do need a little of work. Oh wait, I haven't seen many fruits on hackberries this year. Do they fruit every year?
Do they fruit? So somebody asked, do hackberries fruit every year? Because this person hasn't seen them this year. Actually, I don't know off the top of my head. I would imagine so. And maybe there are environmental reasons why the hackberries that you've seen haven't fruited. I haven't just been looking for that myself, so I might have to do a little homework on that. Um, Here we've got, this is actually a Carpinus caroliniana. I actually use the scientific name on this because depending on where you live, this actually goes by a number of different common names. If you get up close to the bark, you can see it's got this kind of smooth gray feature, which leads some people to call it blue beech because beech trees have really smooth, what's sometimes called elephant skin trunk, but it's not a member of the beech family, so I don't like to use that name. Other people call it a musclewood because you can kind of, that kind of undulating, smooth gray bark. You think of it almost like taut mussel as well. But again, depending on where you live, it uses a different name. So this is an understory species. It's never going to get more than, say, about 20, 25 feet high, which would make it a good choice if you're planting underneath power lines or something like that, or you've got some mature trees around you. It's actually a member of the birch family, not beech family. So the leaves, that's actually a white oak that doesn't belong to this tree. Oh, let's see if we can find some leaves here. I don't see one here, but the leaf sort of resembles a birch leaf in that it's got a toothed margin like we saw with the linden later. Yeah, that's actually honey locust. So you will see these around in parks. They don't get particularly tall. Best way to ID these is that smooth gray bark and kind of the staggered red buds and the red twig here. And now I present to you the state tree of Illinois. This is a white oak. We were here doing some recon to prep for this walk about a month ago, and it had just fantastic red color to it, more of a brighter red. But even this kind of dark color, you know what? Coming back to that, actually, you can see the clustered buds on the end there again. Oftentimes, oaks keep their leaves on over the winter. So if you want another way to identify oak trees, a number of oak species will hang on to these leaves. I've heard one theory that's because oaks tend to live a long time. Some species, like a lot of maples, grow fast and die young, like many of the silver maples and Norway maples that have reached maturity. They're reaching old age on our city streets. Oak trees can live several hundred years. And so I've heard one theory that they keep those leaves to protect the bud for next year. And so I haven't heard anything to dispute that. So as we mentioned earlier,
we have one question about that tree. What's the common name?
Again, it's got many common names depending on where you live. One common name is musclewood because of that smooth gray bark with the kind of waviness. Kind of think of it like a taut mussel. Some people call it blue beech because that smooth gray bark is reminiscent of beech trees, which are famous for having smooth bark. I don't like to call it blue beech because this Carpinus, the genus on it, is not a member of the beech family. So to call it blue beech is to me somewhat misleading. So keep the questions coming, by the way. I would much prefer a discussion and whatnot. And so this is a white oak. So again, a simple leaf. We will eventually see some compound leaves. Rounded tips to the lobes here. So it's a member of the white oak group. And white oak is the species. There's fairly deep sinuses between the lobes here. And it's great to see. And so we'll see a couple more down there. But it had just beautiful fall color about 4 weeks ago when we were here doing some recon to prep for this. And let's keep walking. We actually have, what do we have here? You know what? We've got a hackberry that is still very bright green and beautiful. And so here we have a better image of, here we've got a better image of that asymmetric leaf, particular if you look at the base. You see pull it out a little farther there. Oh, there we go. So it's a little bit deeper here, if you will, than it is on this side. So that asymmetric leaf, especially at the base, is a good ID for hackberry. Lindens have that a little bit too, but linden leaf is much wider, if you will. The hackberry leaf is definitely longer than wide. And so, yeah, again, native, we do plant it. It's maybe, there's quite a number of these, but again, very pollution tolerant, very salt tolerant native species. So, and we actually got a real treat here. There are not many of these around town. There are some in Corner Park, and there's also some at the Cook County Forest Reserve Volunteer Center south of Devon off of Central Street. There's a number of them in the parking lot there. So we actually have our first compound leaf. So again, we're losing them. You know what? We'll just use one that is, how about we do that? So from the very top here, from the single bud, we've got multiple leaflets on one, coming from one bud here. So instead of, so this, again, a compound leaf with multiple leaf, each of these is a leaflet as opposed to a leaf, like we saw that white oak there. And ash trees are also opposite in branching structure, if we can see. They're coming out directly across from each other. You can see right there. Is that clear? They're coming out directly across from each other. So that's an example of opposite branching structure. And a cool thing about this species, if you can get up in here, so this is actually blue ash. You see these little ridges here. In the Latin name fraxinus for ash, it's actually in Spanish is Fresno, as in the town in California. Oh, right, actually right where my left finger thumb here. See these ridges here, give it kind of a square cross section to the branch, and hence in the Latin name fraxinus quadrangulata, so like four-sided. And so this is a great way to identify this. So blue ash, really cool to see this. And there's some talk that these are a little bit more resistant to emerald ash borer than the white and green ash that we've lost so many of. And so I only know of a couple of places where they have these, and so great to see this here.
Selma S said, I don't know if you'll walk by it, but there's a tree out there that looks painted completely white. It's at the west border of the Arboretum space. Can you tell us what type it is if you do?
You know what? Hi Selma, how you doing? Good to see you. Selma took the course recently, so thanks for joining us today. I am not sure what that is. I know a number of the ash trees that died due to emerald ash borer were left, and then people painted them as kind of an artistic measure, or did some artistic work with that. So it's very possible that was an ash tree. And there's a newly minted tree keeper who was a part of that project as well, of basically making art out of some of the standing dead ash. We've got 3 more of the white oaks that we just saw earlier, so looking great. Again, about 2.5 years in the ground now. They're looking very healthy. The leaves look good. And these will reach possibly 80 feet tall. Oaks can tend to get pretty big, 80 feet tall, maybe 50 feet wide. We'll see with beautiful exposure here. We're up around the hill a little bit. And I'll tell you what, so we've seen the state tree of Illinois. Why don't we go check out the state tree of Indiana next?
An MC asks, does a leaf with holes or spots mean the tree is diseased, or is that from insects eating it?
It's possibly from insects eating. Oh, so the question was if you see a leaf with holes or spots on it, it could be any number of things. If I'm thinking holes, it's possibly an insect eating it. If it's got spots, that could be a fungal disease. And actually, we're going to see a Norway maple that's got something called tar spot, and that could very well be something that you've seen. And so we'll discuss that when we get to that in about 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, about 10 minutes, we'll see that. So if you...
Marvin Polak asks, aren't those white oaks planted too close together?
You know, they may seem a little close together, but here in you know, the Arboretum, the natural area, they'll grow plenty tall. And these won't get, if these got so big that they were growing close together, that means they will have lived a pretty good long time, and I'll take that. They may seem a little close together, but we spaced them. We actually measured these when we planted them. So you know, in a couple of years, we'll actually prune some of the lower branches to encourage upward growth. It's what we refer to as structural pruning. So 3 years after a tree is planted, we'll come and prune it to eliminate any crossing branches. And that structural pruning of young trees is actually a specialty of tree keepers. We actually record data of the work that we do. And last year alone, tree keepers pruned over 2,600 trees and mulched another 1,600. So the impact that tree keepers have on trees in our neighborhoods is real. So, and again, we want to take care of our young trees so that they can grow up and reach maturity and provide the full benefits for us. Usually people think like trees, we got to go plant trees. We got to plant trees, everyone. Yeah, we do. We do need to plant trees. But we also really need to take care of our existing trees to help improve our tree canopy. So if we come up here, this is a tulip tree, and you can easily see why by the outline that very, very strongly resembles a tulip. Again, the state tree of Indiana, and these get absolutely massive down there. I've seen some that are 3 feet plus in diameter. When we talk about diameter or size of a tree, we refer to it as DBH, which is diameter at breast height. So, you know, somewhere around your chest, depending on how tall you are. So when arborists and tree folk talk about the diameter of a tree, generally speaking, for a mature shade tree, they're talking about the diameter at breast height, or DBH for short. So I've seen these can get 100 feet or more, a little farther south of here, like in Indiana and Kentucky. Also, another example of a tree with X-current form, and that it's got a very straight central trunk. Instead of a broad spreading crown, one main central leader that the branches will come off of. And again, this is just looking beautiful, looking very healthy. It's already, you know, at 15, 18 feet tall after 2 years, to really give you a hint of just how big these things can get. And so we've got a nice grouping of them here. And these don't really necessarily get particularly wide, so these aren't planted too close together. Next up on our, this will be the fourth oak we've seen. This is kind of cool to see because I live on the northwest side of Chicago, where we have a lot more clay in our soils, and this particular species doesn't like that. It prefers a little bit more sand. And you know what? That help answer your question. For sometimes you can help identify what a tree is by where you are. Are you in a higher, drier spot? Are you in a lower, wetter spot? So where you are can also help you figure out what a tree is. So this is actually pin oak, which by the pointed tips to the lobes helps you know that it's in the member of the red oak group. Very deep sinuses as opposed to the red oak, which tend to be much shallower. And this, again, doesn't really like clay soil, so you'll see almost none of this on the northwest side of the city. Actually, I've been telling people I don't know of any. And I went for a walk in my neighborhood the other day, and I found 2 about 3 blocks north of me. So maybe somebody in the city got tired of me saying there's no pin oak on the northwest side and went and planted a couple, just like, take that, Al. Anyway, there's a lot more sand in the soil here on the south side. We're reasonably close to the lakefront. And so this is very happy in the soils here. And you do want to plant the right tree for the soil type that you have, what we refer to as planting the right tree in the right place. And that way the tree will be happy and reach maturity, and again, provide those full benefits. And so, yeah, again, a nice standing of them here. We've got 4 of them. They all look great. One of the other real good ways to identify pin oak, and you can just, actually, you know what, if you come around here, you can start to see it. The lower branches tend to droop down. And so even from a distance, you can kind of tell pin oak from away. You can kind of see how these are growing down. In fact, there's a famous oak song that we teach people. And the one for pin oak is we do this, because the lower branches pointing down is a real good ID for pin oak. In fact, if anybody does the North Branch Trail, bikes the North Branch Trail to the Botanic Gardens, just north of Gulf, when you cut west on that trail, there's 1 or 2 pin oak, and even from 50 yards away, the drooping lower branches, you can tell that's a pin oak from, I'm kidding you not, 50 yards away. So,
it's 11:35.
11:30. Thank you for that time check. Let's move on. We've got some more trees we need to see. Great. Let's oh, you know what? We got to walk back this way. We got to check out a very special tree for Illinois because its Latin name reflects that it was first identified here. We're going to go check out some pecan trees we planted. Normally you think of pecan trees, that's more of a southern thing, right? It was actually first identified here in the state of Illinois, hence the common name or Korea or Korea Illinoisensis in the Latin name. So often Latin names are, you think it's just a jumble of consonants and vowels. Oftentimes it can be very informative about maybe the shape of the leaf. In this case, his name lets you know where it was first identified. So we've got to go check these out because these look great. It's a member of the hickory family. These don't have fruits yet. So a very long compound leaf, actually what we refer to as pinnately compound. So it's got one kind of brain or spacing on the right word here. So this is again one leaf here. Each of these is an individual leaflet. And so what we call a pinnately compound, I mean, we've got one rachis here and then all the individual leaflets here. When we see buckeye later on, it's going to be palmately compound. So the leaflets are going to kind of form like a hand here. So again, native, we tend to think of this as more of a southern species, but we have planted here. And 3 of the 4 here look actually fantastic. And I just heard that this one suffered a setback in last year, and it's healthy. It's not quite as robust as these are. So just fantastic to see. We took a chance on planting these here, and they look very happy and at home. And you know what? Come to think of it, we've got a buckeye just up ahead here, and I'm going to pick up the pace here because we got a number of cool trees. And even the trees we don't get to, I will add them to the map. We'll share with everyone who's in attendance here today.
Charles Haynes says, is that beetle that looks like a ladybug but yellow a threat to any specific tree or isn't considered a pest?
So we had a question about a bug that looks like a ladybug but is yellow. I don't actually know what that is offhand. So if there are any tree keepers out there who know better than I do, or anybody at all can answer that, that would be awesome. I don't quite have enough information to answer. The last tree we just looked at was a pecan, which is a member of the hickory family. It's Korea Illinoisensis. Again, that Latin name refers to it being first identified in the state of Illinois. So we've got another little leaf linden here, which has got again that asymmetrical leaf base and a kind of almost of a heart shape. So in the Latin, this is Tilia Chordata, chordata meaning heart shape. Another easy way to tell lindens, they tend to sprout from the base of the trunk. So you can see all of these. It kind of propagates by spreading, you know, these little baby lindens from the trunk here. So if you see that, that's also a really easy way to identify a linden. It does that naturally, and you may, it's like, do you want to go and prune that? Depending on where you are, you may just want to, because it may just turn around and you may cut them and it may just resprout that way. Tell you what, I don't have any leaves on this buckeye to show you that palmately compound leaf. They're actually kind of famous for dropping their leaves early, so that doesn't surprise me too much. One thing you can see is that they're also known for having big fat buds to them. And so you can see that's a pretty sizable bud there. So that can help you identify it. And in fact, it's not sticky. And so if a big fat sticky bud like on a tree that looks like this would tell you you've got a horse chestnut. And if it's not sticky, then you know you've got a buckeye of some sort. And so in the bark itself, it's kind of this ashy gray, smooth bark. And the branches kind of arch out towards the end here. Actually, if you can see that, they kind of droop down and then kind of arch out this way. So the overall form can help you out there. So
When I asked if everyone could mute themselves,
if you know what, I just got a comment that there's a little background noise. So if I could have everyone mute yourselves. Again, if you've got questions or comments, which we definitely encourage, use the chat feature for that, and we'll either try to answer them or we've got a number of tree keepers here. Thank you for joining, who can try to answer that as well. This is a Bur Oak, and we're going to see a much cooler version of this later on. It's great to see a young Bur Oak here. We're going to check out a mature Bur Oak that's like 400 years, or I'm sorry, about 200 years old later on. We measured the DBH of it here when we did inventory training with tree keepers. It's like 44-inch diameter at breast height, so 44 inches around. Absolute monster, beautiful tree. Would love to see that added to like a heritage tree list, so we get some special protections for that tree if possible. You know what? Where's that Norway? They mentioned about seeing spots in a tree, so let's go take a look at an example of that. We've got some a stand of red oak here, and even from a distance, you can kind of see the flat, smooth tops to those ridges, which give it that that kind of ski track, ski slope appearance. So even from a distance, I can kind of identify those as red oak. So we can still see it here. If you get up close, where's a good example of this? Here we go. So this is the maple. This is actually a Norway maple, a very, very common street tree. In fact, there are too many of these things out here. Again, maples have opposite branching structures, so they come directly across from each other. It's a simple leaf, so it's just one leaf here instead of many. And you will see a lot of these. When we lost so many American elms decades ago, we wanted to plant fast-growing trees to replace that canopy. Well, we planted a great number of Norway maples like this one, and silver maples that are really reaching the end of their lives here. So in reference to somebody brought up earlier, I see spots in my trees sometimes. Even here, you can still see a little bit here. Norway maples and even silver maples are notorious for getting a fungal disease called tar spot, which is exactly what it sounds like, this kind of blackened sort of splotch on the leaves. It's fungal. It looks terrible, but it's really pretty benign. That's a result of a series of wet springs we've had that have resulted in a lot of fungal diseases. So wet springs and then dry summers, but really, even as bad as that looks, that's not really harmful to these. And so, as you can see, it's good to know I'm right. The sign says Norway maple. That's great. Oftentimes, maple leaves can look pretty similar to each other, and so bark is actually a good way to help tell different maples. In particular, Norway maple leaves and sugar maple leaves look pretty alike, but Norway trees have this kind of ridged bark to it, whereas sugar maple is a little bit more of a broken sort of platy appearance. So you can kind of see the ridges there. And so if you're not sure if a tree is a sugar maple or a Norway maple is going to have these kind of tight ridges to it, where sugar maple is going to be more like kind of broken plates. Let me think, what else did we want to see around here? Actually, let's go. We've got another hickory here, and then I see our giant Bur Oak on the horizon. So, and as always happens, I see another tree we should go check out. So this is a native tree, another very, very tough native tree. Any Logan Square residents, you'll see a whole bunch of these on Logan Boulevard. And the giant heart-shaped leaves here, this is actually a Catalpa. And so again, just an absolutely huge leaf, heart-shaped. So native species, we do plant these. Very vigorous, tough tree. Also sometimes referred to as the cigar tree, due to the pods you see here. Tough, vigorous tree. Actually, these need pruning at a young age. I told you about that structural pruning. They're so vigorous, they're kind of messy when they're young. But if you can get them, resolve those crossing branches and get them growing upright instead of out and sprawling, they make great long-lived trees. They'll handle the salt, they'll handle the pollution. You will see these, you'll see them around town. You'll see them up and down the parkways and boulevards and whatnot, and great native trees. So, you know what? Another tree that was really planted heavily after all the loss of the American elms was honey locust. Even though we do have some leaflets here. So this is actually, again, another pinnately compound leaf. So from the single rachis, we have all sorts of leaves normally be on both sides. Very fine leaflets on this. So each again is a leaflet. And with this almost like fine texture to it, allows a little bit of sunlight in, which helped make these popular. Again, this was another tough tree that could take the salt and the pollution, tough urban tree. And another easy way to tell it, even without the leaves on it, it's almost got kind of this zigzag sort of shape to the twig there. In the season, it's almost like a yellow color. So think of it as like a yellow zigzag. And another easy way to identify honey locust, if we get up close to this thing, sort of broken platey, like broken vertical plates to the bark here. Once you kind of get a feel for this, you can identify this. Now, the native species honey locust has thorns to it, as you can see here. The vast majority of what was planted up and down streets, and I've seen subdivisions that were one honey locust after another. This is definitely a tree that is overplanted. Appreciate the ones we have, but I don't actually recommend planting these. So the ones that were planted up and down streets were a variety called inermis, meaning unarmed. And so they found a variety that didn't have thorns, and that's what they bred and propagated. So sometimes you'll see that variety inermis, meaning unarmed one, actually wind up developing thorns. That is a sign of stress. That means this tree is just not happy. And this thing's pretty old. It could be problems with the soil or soil compaction. So even thornless honey locusts sometimes will wind up showing thorns like that. That's a pretty serious thorn there. And oftentimes, like I said, that's a sign of stress. And usually when trees are stressed out, usually it's something to do with the soils. And so again, you will see these up and down the street. You'll have no problems finding honey locusts probably where you live.
Deborah Hammond says honey locusts on the south side don't look so good this past summer. What might be causing that?
Some drought stress. So there was a question that, let's tell you what, let's move this way. So we had a question come in that honey locusts on the south side weren't looking particularly good this year. And it's quite possible it's just drought stress this summer. After that wet spring, we had kind of a hot, dry summer. And so it might just be drought stress that way. It might also just be old age. Some of them might be getting kind of old. And so we won't, let's see how close we can get to the leaflets here, So we've got actually another hickory, and this is really cool because you don't really see a whole lot of these. This is what's called Bitternut Hickory, and it's related to the pecan tree we saw earlier. And so you can kind of see if you get up kind of underneath it or get the blue background, you can kind of see again that pinnately compound with the leaves towards the leaflets towards the tip being a little bigger than the leaflets towards the base. And then it's also got that terminal leaflet too, pointing straight out. So again, Bitternut Hickory related to the pecan. And what about a quick check of the time, please?
11:50.
11:50? Oh, great. Let's keep checking because we got all sorts of more trees here. And we just have to check this out because this is just amazing, amazing species. One of the ways you can tell if a Bur Oak from a distance, oftentimes they're wider than they are tall, or as wide as it is tall. Look at the sheer breadth of this thing. In fact, if for those of you who read the November Tree Keepers newsletter, this is an image that we listed for this tree walk. This is that tree in that image. So if we get up close, we can see just the absolute massive size of this thing. Looks like some charcoal there. I'm not actually really all that skinny a guy for those of you who don't know me. And this thing is just massive. Again, 44-inch diameter breast height we measured this as. And great to see 200 plus years old on this. So great to see it still around. And if we ever have like kind of a list of heritage trees, this would be the first one I would recommend to add to it. And let's take a look at the leaf for oak. Again, a simple leaf. Its probably most identifiable characteristic is that it's fuller on the far end, and then a very deep sinus about halfway to the base here. So very full, and then a very, very deep sinus, and then again rounded tips to the lobes. So you've got member of the white oak group, as Bur Oak is, and these thick, thick ridges. Now, this helps Bur Oak survive fire because fire is important to prairie health. And so, a fire can move across a prairie, and the Bur Oak really isn't going to be affected by this. So that thick bark like that can help that survive. Fire is important because it helps get rid of invasive species, but native species have deeper roots and can withstand that. And so, tell you what, let's.
Cynthia Quick says, what part of Washington Park is Allen with so many varieties of trees?
Hi, Cynthia, how you doing? We are in the northwest corner of Washington Park. We are north of Garfield Boulevard and just east of Martin Luther King Drive. And we can, again, share out a map of that. Let's see, what were some other trees that we had identified here? And we're making our way north. Hopefully we're gonna meet up with our partner to hear about the natural area that the Park District has and the stewardship there. And I know I had some more trees here. Let's go find some. And in the meantime, we can just enjoy the beautiful color and outdoor space. You know what? I think we're coming up on a couple more. We don't have a whole lot of evergreens in Chicago just because it's just not the right climate for them. I did happen to stumble across this walking around. Actually, we're gonna get 2 for 1 here. The main reason, this is actually a Scotch pine, or Scots pine, if you will. I don't really see a whole lot of these, not native. When we talk about pine tree ID, a lot of times what we do is count the number of needles per fascicle. And this has 2 needles per fascicle. And Austrian harp at the end, and that I would just be saying, ouch, this is an Austrian Scots pine or Scotch pines. You see a little bit of orange on the inside of the bark. The only other pine that I can think of that has that real orange color is Ponderosa Pine, which we don't have in this part of the country. Ponderosa Pine famously populates the Southwest, like Gila National Forest, where they get big. And then they get massive up in Oregon and the Pacific Northwest, where they can reach 200 plus feet. Again, we don't really have Ponderosa pine here, so if you do stumble across a pine that's got some orange to it, you're probably dealing with a Scotch pine or Scott pine. Now, this thing growing up underneath it here is a mulberry, which is kind of an invasive sort of weedy tree, and it's just taken off underneath here. Actually, speaking of orange, a real good way to identify mulberry is this kind of orange tinge to it. And if you see a big mature mulberry, the inside of the bark, you can kind of see as a real distinct orange color. Another really cool thing about mulberry leaves is that they are what we refer to as polymorphic, poly meaning many, morph again meaning shape. And so even on a single tree, the leaves can take on different shapes. Like these look different than that. That is the same tree. And so get kind of different sort of shapes to it. A good idea that you've got a mulberry. And even though these are a little kind of weedy, they don't have a reputation as the greatest tree. They do provide fruit. There's actually a couple of these in the park across the street from me. And they work because they actually work as a screen between the parking lot and the playing field. So even though they're not the most greatest tree, they still really serve a purpose there. I personally have a connection to mulberry trees, and I used to live in Kansas many years ago, and we lived up on a hill at the edge of town, and we had a big mulberry tree in the backyard. And not only did my mom used to make like pastries and whatnot, you could climb up into that tree and kind of see out a good ways. So being on a hill, being in a tree, so I kind of have a personal connection to mulberry, so kind of a favorite of mine there. And you know, looking here, you can see these deep ridges on this Bur Oak here. So again, that's probably 100 plus years old, and thick ridges on that Bur Oak tree. And I know we had a cherry tree around here somewhere that I have somehow lost. And give you an idea of just how big this park is, I need a tree here I wanted to show everybody, and I can't find it anymore. So forgive me for that. We are, however, going to check out another native species that we plant quite a bit because it's actually in the same family as honey locust. but it's not as overplanted, and it again can take the salt and the pollution. And what I'm talking about is Kentucky coffee tree, which we have right up here. Let's see, do we have a better? You know what? Let's walk up to the next one. This is a very newly planted one, and let's walk up to the next one, which is a little bit better shape. So we had a question, where exactly are you in Washington Park, which again is 270 acres. We are in the northwest corner of Washington Park. We are just east of Martin and Garfield. And so we can share that out. So I did want to get around to showing this. This is a Kentucky coffee tree. It has a bipinnately compound leaf. So it's got a couple of two different rachii, if you will, before it's got the leaflets, which you can get a little bit of a look at that here. Let's see if I can find something on the ground to, I don't see anything on the ground. So for example, actually, if you can see the one just off to the right there, that is a single leaf. And again, because it's bipinnately compound, it's got arachis and then another one, and then the leaflets. That whole thing is one leaf. So the largest individual leaf on a tree, at least in the eastern forest. A little bit slow growing, so when they're first planted, they don't look like they have a lot there, but it'll live a long time. And with that giant leaf, it makes sense they have kind of a barren branching structure, because if you have these huge leaves, it still provides a ton of shade. Oftentimes this is referred to as the energy tree, because with that massive leaf area, it can soak up a lot of sun and provide a lot of shade in the summer. And then when it loses that, it allows all that sunlight in the winter. And very distinctive bark on this, kind of broken, platy bark. I've actually even referred to it as a bacon strip bark. But once you kind of get a feel for that, you've got a real good feel for for Kentucky coffee tree. Again, same family as honey locust, but honey locust being overplanted. This is something we do plant quite a bit of. And you will see these around. One thing, these are honey locusts and Kentucky coffee tree are legumes, meaning they have pods. But you won't see that on every Kentucky coffee tree, because male and female are actually separate plants on that. So not every Kentucky coffee tree will have a pod. We've actually got a mature mulberry here. So we saw that kind of young, weedy mulberry, and here's a big mature mulberry. You can see a little bit of that orange tint on the inside here.
Does this still produce fruit?
Yeah, it should. I don't quite see any on the ground. Oh, you know what? We get a bonus. Here is that we referred to the Ginkgo tree earlier, and obviously there's a Ginkgo nearby. So this is the leaf of a Ginkgo tree. And it's oftentimes we distinguish between our two basic categories of trees. We either think of them as gymnosperm, meaning naked fruit, or angiosperm. And actually Ginkgo isn't even in either one of those. It is such an old species. How you doing? Are you a natural area steward of the park district perchance? That's great. Perfect timing. So that is just about all the trees I had for us today. In fact, here are the Ginkgo trees in question. Again, beautiful golden yellow fall color. And Ginkgos are also notorious for drying. In fact, that's got to be very tree by tree, because there are two Ginkgos in the street across the street from me. One of them has lost all of its leaves. The other one still has its leaves. So that is a mystery I do not know the answer to. Anybody, I have spent a lot of time talking today. I hope if you've got any questions and comments, share those out. In order for you all to hear somebody else with the natural area on the other side of the park that we'll have to go see another time, or maybe you'll go and see it yourself. So let me turn the mic over to Sam here. Thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. How's it going? My name's Sam.
I want to get a mic.
You know what? Yeah, I'm going to hand Sam the mic here. And while I'm doing this, we're trying to build a relationship. Actually, Tree Keeper, since its inception, has had a relationship with the Chicago Park District. We do a lot of works in Chicago parks. And we're trying to extend that relationship by getting tree keepers more involved. We're trying to get tree keepers more involved with the natural areas, which is kind of a growing program within the park district. And so here to talk about that is Sam, and I'm going to hand him the mic so it'll be easier to hear him. Why don't I have you take that? Okay. And then I'm going to keep my wallet if that's okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, I guess it's okay.
So hope you're having a great Saturday, and thank you for taking time to come here. So why don't we tell you as a person and how you came to get involved, and what is a natural area, and how are you actively maintaining that different than, say, any other park or area?
Absolutely. So my name is Sam Piricello. I have been working with the Park District Natural Areas team for about a little over 2 years, since March 2018. And before that, I volunteered with the Forest Preserves of Cook County, and I worked for a ecological restoration contractor. So I've been involved in natural areas maintenance for a number of years at this point. And the Park District, I've been on these sites for a number of years, working directly with them now for 2 years. So this is one of the parks that I actually oversee on the south side of the city here. And we have the entire lagoon fringes maintained as natural area in Washington Park. So all the lagoon buffers are all natural area, and those are maintained as native plant matrices. So we have herbaceous plants as well as trees around the lagoons, and we have a different kind of management strategy to those compared to other areas in the park. Say like here we have turf panels, lawn, and then trees in them. The natural areas kind of look like this, except instead of turf, you have just a bunch of native plants. And these areas are desirable for the parks for a number of reasons. The first reason, they help pollinator species, so they help insect species pollinate and provide habitat for other wildlife. They can also, especially here, you have lagoon fringes, so the herbaceous vegetation helps a lot with erosion control, so that you don't have erosion right on the edges of the water. And that's a really important thing to maintain the integrity of the shorelines. Can also discourage geese from going into these areas and kind of harming the integrity of the shorelines as well. So those are some of the reasons that we like to have natural areas, and they're really, really beautiful. There's a lot of cool wildflowers and a lot of interesting native plants there. Some of the ones I can think of off the top of my head that we have in the Washington Park lagoons are, there's actually a lot of Indian plantain, which is pretty interesting because we don't have that a lot in the city. So that's one really cool thing you can come check out here. We have some really nice wetland flowers. We have cardinal flower and swamp milkweed and monkey flower and things of that nature. So a lot of really cool wetland stuff because, again, these are sort of lagoon fringes. The soil tends to be a little wetter, so it can have some facultative wetland species and obligate wetland species in there. And yeah, Washington Park, the entire lagoon is natural area, like I said, and this is just one of many in the Chicago Park District system. So we actually have about 2,000 acres, I think a little under 2,000 acres of natural area within the city limits. There's sort of a goal to try to get to 20 acres. It was originally by 2020. We're still going for that goal. It's going to be a little past 2020 now, but over 2,000 acres are going to be represented in the city pretty soon here. And we have a really great team that manages all these areas. And right now we have 12 full-time staff that are on the ground doing natural areas work, including myself. And we have a larger natural areas team that does more administrative things of more of an administrative nature. And we also have a really great network of stewards that are volunteers from the surrounding communities of these parks that volunteer their time, donate their time and effort to help us maintain these parks. So we try to engage the local community and stewards to come out and do work in these parks as much as we possibly can. And it's just a really big help, and it's something that we want to be inclusive for everyone, so everyone feels like they can come out to the park in their community and make a difference, whether it's doing plantings, trash pickup, you know, invasive species control, natural areas tasks that need to occur. So yeah, it's a really nice space. Check it out. There's a lot of cool stuff to see.
Are there any questions for Sam about natural areas or natural area stewardship? I will add that a good number of the natural area stewards for the Park District are tree keepers. We already have that relationship to some extent, and we want to build upon that relationship as well. So any questions or comments for Sam, as long as we've got him here? And thanks again for coming out.
No, we don't have any.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the time. I'll tell you what, you want to do a little tree ID with us? You know,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Sneak one more tree in here, and I'm gonna
do it.
Sam to work here. We've got a couple of nice Eastern Redbud here. Sorry to put you on the spot like
that. It's great.
I'm a little greedy when it comes to trees, I guess. I noticed we've got another member of the legume family here, but it's almost even a little bit of a different subgroup than honey locust and Kentucky coffee tree. And take it away, Sam.
Yeah, so this is an Eastern Redbud. It's a legume as well. I think this is actually a really popular landscaping tree. You see this a lot all over people's lawns and parks and pretty much anywhere. It's got really beautiful pink flowers in the early spring, and it's very desirable for landscaping. It's not able to grow in every single zone, so it's really special that we have it here in Illinois, able to grow as a pretty hardy tree. It's not a really tall canopy tree. The way that you see it here is it probably gets a little bit bigger than this, but it's not going to get as tall as one of these honey locusts or ginkgos or anything like that. And it's got we want to check out the bark over here.
It's got an orange color on the bark today. I guess orange is the theme of the day. Don't ask me why. A number of trees with orange. You get a little bit. It doesn't quite show that well, but kind of an orangish color here. We can plant some of these ourselves. But yeah, the fantastic color of fall or of spring flowers about mid-May, of these beautiful like hot pink magenta flowers to them. And again, we do plant these. Anything more you would add to that, Sam?
I think pretty much covered it. That's about all I would say about the redbuds. I guess it's maybe notable for ID purposes, it has alternating buds. That's one thing you want to, probably covered this already, but first thing you want to look out for when you're trying to ID trees is whether they have opposite, alternate, or whorled buds. That's always the first thing I look for, because it just narrows it down so much for you. So yeah, it's a really cool tree.
Great, fantastic. Well, thank you, everybody. Can you hear me all right, or should I grab the mic again?
Yeah, I got you.
And one last question, can you talk about the sex of
Do you know anything about the sex of ginkgos?
I don't.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I can answer that a little bit. All right. Well, thank you, Sam, for taking the time on this Saturday to come out and join us. I look forward to tree keepers and natural area stewards working together in the future, especially with newly minted tree keeper Lucy Gomez.
Oh, great. That's awesome.
And so we're going to get build a relationship and a partnership there. And if you've got organizations out there too, we want to work together. We can't really organize volunteer events today or immediately, but looking towards the future, we can always plan and do a lot of organizing now so that we can get to a lot of stewardship and grow our respective programs in the future. We did get one question in that talked about the sex of ginkgo trees. Years ago, decades ago, they sometimes wind up planting female ginkgos, which have a very, which has fruit that is very aromatic or perhaps foul smelling, depending on your inclination. And now they basically have only plant male ginkgos. There are actually 2 female ginkgos in the park across the street from my house, and I won't even bike down that street because I don't want to get that fruit on my bike tires and then but seriously, you can smell that ginkgo fruit from 2 blocks away. I kid you not. And so some people consider that desirable and consider that fruit a delicacy. Other people don't like that smell as much. And I actually personally am in the latter category, but I'm not going to tell anybody else how to think. I want to say I got some thank yous to catch up on here. Thanks again, Sam, for coming out on such a beautiful Saturday. I want to thank newly minted tree keeper Lucia Whalen of Open Lands, who has been on the camera here, filming this the whole time. Thank you for all the tree keepers and everyone else who has asked questions and answered questions and contributed to what hopefully was a robust discussion in the chat. Thanks to everybody who came and joined us today. I'm sure there's any number of things you could have done this morning, but instead you decided to join us for this partner walk. Really appreciate it. Our next partner walk is going to be Saturday, December 5th. We are going out to Little Red Schoolhouse in Willow Springs, where we ran the tree keepers course in the spring of 2019. We're going to check up on some trees we planted there in the snowstorm. So that'll be really cool. And we're going to talk to the director there, tree keeper Maritza Roca. So we're going to hear about the programming at Little Red Schoolhouse, see some trees, and we're also going to be joined by Open Lands Outreach Coordinator Jen Adrovo as well. So we're going to hear about Open Lands efforts to engage communities on the southwest side of Chicago. So join us then. I will put together a map of the trees we shared today with their ID, and a reminder, please, if you want trees for your neighborhood or South Suburban community, check out the Tree Planters Grant at openlands.org. If you're looking for ideas of how to get outside, either in your immediate community or the broader Chicagoland community, don't forget to look up the Get Outside map on Openlands. For